Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now to speak on how we can all master the business of our talent is management consultant and life strategist Steve Harris, who evolved from a college dropout to a corporate sellout, as his book depicts. Welcome and good morning to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Great title for the book.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's like dropout to sellout.
Yes, from college dropout to corporate sellout.
Yes. So tell me, what does a life strategist do? Because when I saw that, I was like, a life strategist. Maybe I need one of those.
It sounds snazzy, right? I know. Basically, a life strategist is a life coach.
Okay.
But particularly from the perspective of helping you execute, right? So a lot of life coaches perhaps get you to answer your questions, so they help you get clarity, but they don't help you execute. So what I do is help people create a blueprint for whatever it is they're trying to achieve, but most importantly, get it done. So I'm really big in execution, and I think that's one of the things that perhaps makes me a tad different from the people that I work with.
So I want to talk to you more about your path. So that whole college dropout situation is only laudable because you've made a success of your life, right?
I'm grateful.
Yes. So let's talk about that and the fact that recently, well, increasingly, people are saying that university degrees are becoming obsolete.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? Because it used to be you had to have some kind of tertiary education, but now you have companies like Apple and Google, IBM. They don't require a four-year degree before they hire people.
Well, I think the most important thing is for people to be educated. Now, irrespective of whether that happens within the formalized four walls of university is a totally different kettle of fish, which is why I talk about mastering the business of your talents. Every individual has something that they're naturally wired and fired for. If you allow me, it says, train up a child in the way they were designed to go, and when they grow up, they won't depart from it. So our job as parents is to find out what our kids, so to speak, are naturally wired for, and then educate them, either formally or either through training in that area. Now, whether or not they decide to go through the formalized sector to get a certificate or degree is entirely up to them. But I do think that today that our universities, our colleges are ill-equipped for the challenges of the 21st century. So back in the day when I was in school, I remember one of the courses we had was computer science, and we were taught Fortran 77. Now Fortran is a program that is obsolete. No one uses Fortran anymore. But back then when I was in school, it was a course. We were taught on Fortran, which is a program that no longer existed at the time. So I do think that we've got to go back again into curriculum development. We've got to look at those who perhaps are wired for entrepreneurship and train them in those regards, and then just educate people, whether or not it's within a formalized sector. But that's what I believe.
I just want to get a sense of your personal journey.
Right.
What was it like when you had to make the decision to drop out? Because obviously you were motivated to start.
Yeah.
And as someone that actually is big on execution and knowing that your situation wasn't going to allow you to, what was that like, and how was that decision, how did you come to that decision, or how was that decision made for you?
Exactly, because it was made for me. So full disclaimer, the first time I dropped out of school, I was kicked out. I had a lot of issues with my lecturers. Apparently, we were interested in the same people. If you know, and my lecturers, I was admitted to study industrial math, which I am not a big fan of. It left to me, I should have been in maybe mass communication or something like that. But you know how it is when you're growing up. If you're a smart kid, you go into science. If you're pretty okay, you're in commercial. If you're dumb, you're into arts. So I grew up in a science because I was, so to speak, that smart, that I got into study industrial math, and I wasn't wired for it. It wasn't me. And I barely made it through the cut. So while I did contribute to dropping out in the sense that perhaps I didn't give my all, but also the environment didn't allow me to succeed. So long story short, in my second semester, my third year, I saw those 5 words that no college kid wants to see. Candidates is advised to withdraw. Now, that's after spending 5 years in school plus an ASU strike. So I get kicked out of school. And that perhaps for me led to a journey of introspection and self-discovery, because once I got out of school, I try to see.
Did that feel like a failure to
Of course,
you?
absolutely, because at the time I got kicked out of school, my younger ones, my siblings were already progressing. My younger sister was already working, and then she was giving me an allowance. I had to try to get back into school again. So it was really messy, but I'm really glad that I'm here because all that caused me to question myself and start asking, so what can you do? What comes to you naturally? And eventually, through a process of mentorship, I found some people who reflected not just the values, but perhaps they were a picture of my future. And I was very privileged to understudy them, volunteer, learn the ropes, and I believe, over a period of perhaps 12 years, I've gotten here since then.
So you've talked now about the value of introspection, knowing who you are, and mentorship and apprenticeship. These are very important. But what are the personal qualities that you attribute your success to?
Hunger. Absolute hunger. So I always say that because I don't know who I would have been if I graduated. I don't know whether I'd be a banker, would I be working with this amazing studio with you guys. I don't know. And because I don't know, I feel like I have a blank slate and I can write whatever my future can be. I always say to myself that, if I could ever meet the Steve Harris in an alternate universe or the alternate version of me who actually graduated, I want him to look at me and wish he was me. And it's pretty hard to do. So I'm very relentless. I'm incredibly tough on myself. I don't give excuses as much as possible. So hunger, I dare say, hunger, continuous learning, education. So while I don't have what you might call the formalized degree, I'm incredibly educated about all the things that I'm interested in. So I think those perhaps are the two things that has driven me to so to speak succeed relatively where I am.
So what are those things that you're interested in that has sort of gotten you to this place where you're writing books, you're giving lectures? What are those building blocks what are the things you do every day?
Every day, I mean, okay, apart from the fact that I work out, I'm trying to get my fitness up, but I'm always learning. But I always say to myself, because I have a big library of books, and I say to myself, every book I read or every book I purchase must be able to make the money that I purchased it for. So, for example, I set a mental goal in my mind. So if I spend $10,000 in a book, it has to give me at least 10 times the value for which I invested. Because I noticed that a heck of a lot of people purchase books and contents and, they just stack them and they're not really doing anything with them. So I always say to myself, whatever I study, I've got to find a way to implement it that perhaps I can even monetize the value of what I've learned. So, I listen to podcasts, I read, I associate myself with mentors whose results are, or who that I can say, whose present floor is my present ceiling. You know what I mean? So those kind of associations stretch me. So I'm constantly just evolving and just trying to see how I can become better. I think I'm driven by the question, how can I add value to as many people as possible? And how can I make their lives better? How can I make their businesses better? How can I accelerate their businesses? Because that's what I really do. I accelerate businesses. I accelerate results for individuals and organizations. And that constantly drives me.
So when your phrase, mastering the business of your talent, what it called to mind, I want to ask you what you mean by that. But personally for me, what it called to mind was the quote that's been attributed to Einstein. I don't think he actually said it though. Everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb, it's going to think it's stupid.
Yes.
So what does that mean to you?
Well, for me, mastering the business of your talent again is, first off, helping people to discover what they carry. A lot of people don't know. So we have unconscious competence at the things that we do. And because I work a lot with entrepreneurs, I've realized that, most entrepreneurs, most SMEs jump into business because of passion. And unfortunately, passion just doesn't pay the bills. So they jump into the oceans of passion because of passion, and they start swimming and realize that they're drowning because they don't know how to swim. And so first off, for me, my framework is helping you discover what are you wired and fired for, what comes to you naturally. Some sort of psychometric testing, just figure out what you're doing. But then again, most importantly, how do you then monetize? Because there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are working incredibly hard, but they don't know how to make money. They're not profitable. They're passionate, but it's not coming together, and they have responsibilities. And many of them have either left jobs or this is their only mainstay, and they don't know how to make it work. So over the last, I don't know, 3-4 years, I've been privileged to personally work with about over 630 entrepreneurs, just to help them accelerate their business. For those who perhaps have giftings and talents and say, you know, how do you identify what comes to you naturally? Because I tell people, just like you said with the Einstein quote, fish don't take swimming lessons. Birds don't go to flight school. So everyone has something that they're wired and fired for. And if we can put them in that environment and help them become the best with excellence, and then be able to create a monetizable framework, then to accelerate their businesses, then I believe that I would have been able to help as many people as possible. So that's pretty much what it's all about.
With the number of clients you've helped, can you tell us like some of the dramatic shifts that have happened that you've seen happen with people? Or even people saying, look, I think this isn't for me. I'm gonna go be a swim teacher. Like, tell us some of the dramatic shifts you've actually seen in real life.
I think for me, it's the possibilities that, for many people, they're like, oh my God, I never knew this was possible. So, you know, because like I said, I'm really big on execution. So one of the first things I find is, with my framework, I try to get people to tell me what their goals are. And it's pretty scary that most people don't even know what their goals are. They don't have goals. So when I say to you, what are you trying to achieve during this period? They're like, well, I just want to make money. I'm like, no, what is it? And it's scary to find out that they have no sense of clarity, and they don't know what they're trying to achieve. So they're playing it by ear. They're winging it, so to speak, hoping to get something done. But then, of course, beyond helping them clarify, I remember one of my clients who she had set a goal. She works a 9 to 5 and has a business on the side, and her goal is to ultimately segue into her business as her full-time business. And she set a financial goal, because I'm very big on goals and, you know, what do you want to achieve and how can I help you accelerate? And she set this financial goal that she wanted to achieve, which she'd never been able to do in maybe about 4 years of business. And we worked together, and she not just only achieved it, she exceeded it. And, you know, for me, there's nothing better to help someone realize that all this time, perhaps you've just been playing small, you know, and then they achieve it or exceed it, and they're like, oh my God, this is so possible. And I think for me, that's the best. I mean, it's a total 180-degree turn, and nothing's better than that.
All right, we're going to go on a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with you, especially around unlocking those talents within you. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show. We're still with Steve Harris, the consultant manager and management consultant and life strategist, who was a college dropout and now a corporate sellout.
You're here. Yes. You're here.
But, okay, so I wanted to ask you, you used the phrase wired and fired several times, but what about, everybody is wired for something. Right. What about those who are not fired? What about those who lack motivation? How do you help them?
Well, everyone's motivated by something. You just have to find out what it is. Some people are motivated by money. Some people are motivated by fame and influence. Some people are motivated by children's school fees. So you've got to find what makes them tick. For everyone, they have their why, and your why drives your what. So when I work with people, I try to figure out, you know, what's the most important thing and why you're doing what you're doing. By the time we unlock that why, then it's very, very compelling to. It just keeps them motivated. So it's quite a very detailed process, but. You know, you don't help people get that kind of clarity until you spend a bit of time with them, look at their past, look at their motivating factors, and then, you know, you go up from there.
I saw that you have a book called From Friend to Fiance.
Yes, I do.
And I wanted to ask you about that. And there was a phrase I saw that says, how to get him to want you without him knowing that you want him to want you. I don't agree to that, but I want you to clarify what you mean by that.
Okay, so I wrote this book a couple of years ago because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. You know, she was like, you know, there's this guy that I like. He's really amazing. I think he's husband material, 12 yards, but he's friend-zoned me, and I don't know how to get his attention. So I decided, okay, you know what, heck it, this is what you need to do to get his attention. And I shared with her a couple of tips. And I said to her, look, it's going to work in about 2 weeks or less. When it does, you know, holler back at me. And then she calls me back in about 10 days, and she says, well, Steve, he's, you know, literally eating out of my hands. And then she says to me, you should do something. You should write a book about this. And I did. And for me, the purpose was because I realized that with relationships, it's about positioning. There are many good girls, and I wrote this for girls, and I wrote this and I said there are many good girls out there, but they're not positioned correctly. And unfortunately, it may seem quite chauvinistic. It does seem to be skewed in the man's favor, because it's almost like it's a buyer's, it's a seller's market, because, so to speak, the guys may be in some sort of high demand. Because if a woman, right, because I think it's double standards, because if a man gets to a certain age and he's not married, society just gives him a pass. The only person who's really stressing him is his mom. But if a woman gets to a certain age, society begins to ask her questions and, all sorts of things. And I try to see how I could help, so to speak, even the odds a little bit. Because I find that while the girl is pining and she's in a relationship with a guy that she likes, the guy is not thinking about marriage. The average guy is it's taking longer for a guy to get married. Back in the day, a guy could set a goal and say, when I'm 30, I'm going to get married. Now we're shifting the goalpost to 40. The guy wants to hammer, he wants to blow before he gets married. And unfortunately, by the time he's ready, that lady who spent all this time with him is someone he now kicks to the curb, and then he looks for someone younger. So I kind of felt like it was just weird. It wasn't right. How do we help women position themselves? Because
so this is an empowerment.
It is. Basically, it is. Basically, it is.
So I suppose you're trying to appeal to people who have that particular goal.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
So yes, in the course of my research, I came across that book, but I also came across a business model, an interesting business model that you use to illustrate a point. I'm not going to mention names,
okay,
but a Nigerian social media person, I'm sure you do.
I remember.
So you were highlighting from that person's social media persona how to monetize what it is that you're interested in.
Right.
So without naming names, can you expand on that?
Okay, so I was talking about how this particular individual has been able to drive the conversation using attention. And I said that most businesses don't know how to generate attention for what they do. And then I talked about how when you're trying to create a brand, your brand is going to evoke one of 5 general emotions. People are going to love you, they're going to hate you, they're going to love to hate you, they're going to hate to love you, or they're going to ignore you. Now, unfortunately, many businesses fall in the ignore category because they post something out maybe on social and Instagram, and people don't even like. They don't know how to generate attention. And I mentioned how I met this particular individual in the mall, and all of us, I'd never met him. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he passed me, and I was like, he was walking towards me. I was like, oh, pretty girl. And then he walks past me. I'm like, no, and it was like, oh, wow, it's a guy. And then I did a bit more research, and I realized who he was. And I wasn't endorsing a lifestyle. What I was talking about was the ability for businesses to be able to generate attention. And I talked about how your brand is a compendium of conversations that people are having about you, whether it's positive or negative. Now, if you're not generating conversation, you're not generating attention. So I was trying to help businesses to say, how do you generate attention for what it is that you do? So I gave the reference and I said, be like this person. Take these lessons, right? Own what you do. Don't be afraid to, if you have to, stimulate some level of controversy, because controversy creates conversation. Conversation creates attention. And what you want to do is get attention, because if you don't get people's attention, they're going to move on to the next. The time frame to get anyone's attention, particularly these days, is about 3 to 5 seconds. So if you don't get attention, people are just going to swipe and move on. And that's what I was talking about. It raised a huge furor.
So
it was dramatic. It was amazing. But hey, it was good, and I hope I got my point across.
I got your point.
I feel like, I think that when you're looking at building a brand and you have to understand what type of brand you're building.
Exactly.
And I think that what people just need to understand is that not all brands are created equally.
Absolutely.
And once you know what your brand stands for and what your brand
represents,
go with it. Then just go with it.
Absolutely. Which is why I said it's one of those 5, and it's all intentional. This particular gentleman creates a brand. And the very weird thing about it was he sent me a DM later and said to me that, he said a bunch of things, but he was saying that, in essence, what he was doing was intentional, because he's smiling to the bank. So people can complain, but he was smiling to the bank. But his brand is being built on the hate. I want people to hate me so much that they must talk about me. But most entrepreneurs are not that strategic, so we play it by ear, and unfortunately, we fall into the ignore category.
One of the things that you said, which I kind of want to go back to. Sorry, I know we're talking about something else now, but I wanted to go back to, which is, what is it that you think about the culture that continues to put so much pressure on women to the point that you had to actually write a book like this?
Well, I think we are sadly in some sort of, I don't know, there's this patriarchy that somehow tends to stifle women and their expression. And like I said, there's some sort of double standard. So please forgive me. If a young man is sexually active and he has several girlfriends, he's a player. If a girl is in that position, she's something else. You know what I mean? And it's double standard. So the guys are rewarded, so to speak, for bad behavior, and the women are vilified. It seems like, you know, like I said, if a man is at a certain age, he's not married, people are going to know, you know, whatever. But if a woman is at a certain age and she's not, then people begin to vilify her.
So when you help people, I mean, because you're a life strategist,
yes.
How do you help women sort of get out of this mindset in a way that they're empowered to sort of pursue their own?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remove all those associations of what society deems to be politically correct and help them own who they are, not apologize for who they are, and then recognize, because unfortunately I find that because of the societal pressure, most of the women I've worked with have either had a sense of insecurity or their self-worth is low. So there's a lot of work that goes into rebuilding. And then I find that some of the people that I've worked with are replicating experiences based on the patterns that they've had. So they're playing a psychological script that they're not even aware of. So give a practical example. So I remember this particular lady who her husband wanted to, you know, go into business and da-da-da. And she was very, you know, she never wanted to support him. She was just very, very anti that. And by the time I had a session, because he didn't know what it was, and by the time I had a session with her and him, we realized that back in the day, her father had worked a pretty good job, cushy job, decided to leave the job, start business, failed woefully, died. So subconsciously, she associated going into business with death. So when her husband wanted to do the same, she didn't know why. We had to literally go back in time. She didn't know why, that every time she thought about business, she thought she was protecting her husband.
Now I know what a life strategist does. Now I know what a life strategist does.
But it's important to say, as we're running out of time, that pressure does exist in the lives of a lot of women. But men also have their own pressure. Absolutely. A man must be a model of virility. A man dare not be broke, or you are less than a man. So men also, so it's not all on women, it has to be said.
I agree. I agree.
So mastering the business of your talent, monetizing what it is you're wired and fired to do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.